Farm Kenya, brought to you by Fugo.
Maziwa kwa wingi, ni kama mvua. Maziwa kwa wingi, utashiba.
Akishiba, utashiba. Fugo Calf Starter Pellets, Calf Grow Pencils, Heifer Grow, Dairy Milk Plus, and Maxi Milk Plus. Products of Unga Farm Care.
Akishiba, utashiba. Utashiba.
Profite na ng'ombe wako. Good afternoon, welcome. This is the Farm Kenya show. My name is Peter Wakaba, and you're just in time for 1 hour of news, views, and of course analysis from across the world of agriculture here on this show that brings you information that you can use to, of course, drive your growth, your production, your productivity in the field of agriculture. My name is Peter Wakaba. Now, let's engage for the next 1 hour. Today, we will be talking about something really interesting, and we want to talk about fertilizer. Of course, that goes hand in hand with your productivity, the productivity of your land, and of course, the sustainability of that productivity for the foregoing period. Now, for decades, excuse me, after independence, fertilizer use in Kenya has largely been centered on the three big macronutrients, that's nitrogen, phosphorus, and of course potassium, which, while being essential for plant growth, only form just part of the full picture. Today, we know that micronutrients like calcium, magnesium, and zinc play equally important and critical roles in your crop production, from building strong cell walls to powering photosynthesis and driving key metabolic processes. Now, to help us understand the importance of a more complete fertilization approach for your soil, we have an expert in studio who's going to talk to us about this, especially in view of the planting season that is going on and the fact that many Kenyans turn to the same thing, that is the subsidized fertilizer offered by government for their productivity. We will be joined in studio by an expert, Geoffrey Ikigo. He is a highly experienced agronomist specializing in crop husbandry, soil fertility, plant nutrition, research, training, and crop protection. Now, Godfrey is passionate about advancing agriculture processes and practices through crop nutrition, soil conservation, and climate-smart agriculture. He works with Yara East Africa. He is here to guide us on just which fertilizers are suitable to use and when, and to unlock the true potential for our farmers through the correct application of fertilizer. Now, of course, you will remember that key to the question of fertilizer is the question of soil testing. That in just a few minutes with our expert. In the meantime, before that conversation, let's take a quick look at what's making headlines in the agriculture space in our agri-news segment. Well, we'll start off in the space of climate change, where Kenyans have been urged to step up efforts in tree planting as a critical measure to secure water bodies, water sources, and sustain their future. Environmentalists, educationists have cited tree planting as a tool for combating climate change and one that is essential to safeguarding rivers, springs, and water catchment areas. Speaking during a tree planting exercise at Rubura Dam in Gatundu South, the stakeholders led by Mama Ngina University Principal Zipporah Ngananga noted that forested watersheds naturally filter water, reducing soil erosion and the flow of water into rivers and dams.
This one?
Anytime you are in an environment with trees, it is extremely refreshing. There is climate change in the entire world. One of the big reasons for climate change is destruction of forests. And therefore, as Mama Ngina University College, we want to be part of the people to make a difference in the world by reversing the adverse effects of climate change.
Pale darasani kila mara tunafunzwa kuhusu kulinda mazingira. Leo tumefurahi kupata hii opportunity ya kukuja kulinda mazingira kwa kupanda miti.
Ya kupanda miti ili to conserve environment kulingana na agenda ya serikali, agenda ya county government na pia agenda ya Gatundu Water to make sure ya kwamba vituo vyetu vyote vya maji zimekuwa conserved in the best way possible. kulingana na vile inastahili ili tuwe na maji ya kutosha katika eneo letu.
While moving on, a dispute between the British tea plantation and the local community in Western Kenya has reached boiling point after what is seen as a sign of turbulent times ahead for tea producers who are facing a growing backlash over colonial injustices. Take a look.
In the lush tea fields of the Sitwe estate in Nandi Hills, Kenya, a quiet standoff with deep colonial-era roots is underway. Women like Milka Chapkwoni are back in the fields, picking tea not as workers, but as landowners, they say.
Tuko hapa tukikubaliwa na kotini. Na sisi tunajuna chai mjana sio usiku. Sababu usiku wanaweza sema ni mwizi. Lakini tuko na kibali na tunajuna chai tukifurahi. Sisi ni wenye shamba.
More than 100 residents are occupying 350 acres of land they say was gifted to them in 1986 by Eastern Produce Kenya, or EPK. The firm, majority owned by London-listed Camellia PLC, says the gift was for 202 acres. But the local Kimasa's Farmers Collective claims that all 550 acres belong to them. The standoff follows several violent incidents at estates in Kenya, the world's fourth leading tea producer. According to the Kenya Tea Growers Association, or KTGA, these incidents threaten a valuable Kenyan export industry that supports 5 million livelihoods. But several people working on land issues told Reuters the movement reflects a broader frustration with the failure to remedy colonial-era injustices. Behind the rolling green hills are modest homesteads, mud walls, hanging clothes, and children's futures rooted in contested soil.
Tulitesekea kwa hiyo shamba kidogo ambaye walitukatia na wakachukua chai yetu ambaye tulikuwa tumepewa ambaye watoto wetu wangejisaidia nayo kusoma kama watu wengine. So hiyo ndio shida ambaye tumepitia.
From 1895 to 1963, British authorities seized vast tracts of land, much of which became tea plantations, according to a 2021 UN report.
Babu yangu aliyezaa baba yangu.
Kimasa's chairman Daniel Biwott said his grandfather lived on the land before it was seized around 1905. Belonging to the third generation of EPK employees, he believes reclaiming the disputed 350 acres would right a historical wrong. Awareness of historical injustices has grown since 2010, when Kenya established the National Land Commission, or NLC, to address the issue. It found in 2019 that all 550 acres belonged to Kimasas. EPK contested that in court, saying Kimasa's evidence was forged. That same year, the NLC called on the British government to apologize to communities in Kericho County, a tea-producing area southwest of Nandi, and provide reparations. The British government has not directly responded to that call. The Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office said it was concerned by the attacks on tea farms in Nandi and was in contact with the Kenyan authorities. Under Kenya's 2010 constitution, tea companies' previous 999-year leases were reduced to 99 years. But activists complain the government has not used its ownership of the land to extract meaningful concessions for local communities. While a former commissioner of the NLC said its effectiveness was undermined by its limited mandate and a, quote, unholy marriage between tea companies and the political elite. The tea companies say they comply with Kenyan law. They accuse some politicians of exploiting historical tensions. The Kenyan government did not respond to requests for comment. EPK first acquired the land in Nandi in 1948 and said that the current dispute is not over historical land injustice, but rather a gift made on a, quote, willing donor, willing donee basis. As litigation proceeded, more than 200 people overran the disputed plot in August 2023 and began plucking tea. A court quickly issued an injunction ordering them to leave. Most did, but many returned. In January, EPK said squatters attacked a company car and employees. Peter Goyne is the EPK general manager.
If this is allowed, then such opportunistic situations can arise. It is dangerous and precedents that should be stopped at all costs.
The firm said police haven't enforced the injunction, and the public prosecutor's office said any prosecutions risked interfering with the civil case. Neither responded to Reuters' request for comment.
Lakini sasa saa hii nafurahia vile koti ilitutambua
Biwott, though, said Kamasas felt justified occupying the land because there has been no final ruling against it.
Mungu aliweka mbele mambo mazuri kwetu mpaka saa hii tunamiliki. Ingawaje hatujamiliki kabisa, lakini tunaomba Mungu tutamiliki. Hiyo ndio furaha yangu sasa.
Well, not everyone's cup of tea, but of course quite something to think about. Local communities and the land on which that major Kenyan export is farmed. Now, moving on, Kenyans are being urged to stop food waste by cooking only what they can eat and avoid dumping that food into dustbins. Speaking during the World Soup Day celebrations in Nairobi, Saja Rehema, the Slow Food Youth Network Kenya coordinator, said that food waste is one of the biggest drivers of climate change. She emphasized the need to rethink the handling of food, saying that reducing waste is a powerful way to protect the environment.
Food has the power to stunt our growth and hinder our health. And when you think about the type of food, the preferences that consumers have in Kenya, it's usually towards unhealthy and non-nutritious foods. So that's why the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition and Slow Food Kenya today are looking at how we can reimagine food loss, food waste and the losses that occur.
So when you look at food waste is one of the biggest contributors when it comes to environmental degradation or environmental pollution. So why don't we come together and turn this waste into a resource?
We are saving our food, save our planet as a way of trying to mitigate against food loss and also climate change.
I'd like to urge all people out here, including the young people, to come up and talk about issues to do with food waste, not only in events like this, but even at your home. Make sure that you cook only what you can consume, you shop only what you need, not shopping a lot of food that you end up wasting it in the dustbin.
Well, for a lot of people, the major bone of contention is not being able to store it for a later date, and of course, the cost of cooking small batches rather than saving that energy by cooking a lot, but something to think about. Now, we want to take a look at the prices of Irish potatoes across different markets across the country in a session today on commodity prices, so take a look. Well, thank you for staying with us here on the Farm Kenya show. On that part of the show, we of course told you about the discussion that we would be having today around the concept of fertilization for your soil and which are the key fertilizers. And of course, then give you a quick look across the country in terms of news that's setting the stage for discussion with our expert here today, Godfrey Kigu. Karibu sana.
Thank you so much.
As a person who lives, breathes, sustainability of the soil through, of course, maintaining its productivity. I've heard you say before that the key to knowing about how to fertilize your soil and keep it in its prime is soil testing.
Correct.
Let's start there.
Yeah. So I think with everything, it's data and information. Anything that you're planning to do, you need data. It's the same for farming. Because essentially what you're doing when you're getting a crop is converting the nutrient into the soil, into a crop, into something that you'll harvest eventually for consumption. So now what soil testing does is it provides the farmer with that information on what is available, what is in excess, and what will be the biggest limiting factor to his production. So what that will do is give the farmer the ability to make the right decision.
Yes.
Because otherwise, if you go in blind, you don't know what is there, what is missing, what is actually in plenty. Because again, when one is in plenty, that is also not a good thing. So that is what soil testing gives to the farmers.
So during this planting season, because it has started raining all over the country, a lot of farmers are going into the planting season, millions and millions of them across the country.
Yeah.
What percent do you think has tested their soil?
Oh, unfortunately, the number is quite low. I remember when we were looking at a number a few months ago, it was drastically low.
Yes.
It's not even significant.
So essentially we're saying that over 90% of our farmers have gone into this planting season blind.
Correct.
And they have thus also accepted the donation by government in terms of the subsidy without knowing if they need it or not, and have then gone ahead to trust their faith to that lack of information.
So what has happened is the government, through institutions like CALRO,
yes,
they already have some data, indicative data on what the conditions of our soil is.
Yes.
So based on this, they can be able now to have a general recommendation of which type of fertilizers would be suitable.
Yes, for whichever area.
Yes. Now for the specific farmers, of course, that may not be the reflective of the actual, but it's good enough based on the data that CALRO has. Yeah.
So, and I think for us that's a good point to start, because for many farmers across Kenya, their productivity is just good. But we know that there is the potential to go beyond that and push productivity to ensure that they start doing what we say, farming as a business.
Correct.
How do we get them to start walking that journey? What should farmers be doing today to start saying that that is what we're doing?
All right. Again, it goes back to data and information.
Yes.
You see, farming is a continuous learning process, and it evolves. It changes. What worked 5 years ago might not necessarily work today. So farmers, what they need to do is to keep updating themselves on the new emerging technology, the changes within their soils and the climate, because all these factors will contribute to how productive your enterprise will be. One of the things that we have already mentioned, the soil testing, that gives you a very, very good starting point. Then the next step is to find the right input that will be suitable to that particular soil based on the data that you currently have. That is essentially where the farmers should start.
And so when you say input, it might not necessarily be a fertilizer in the traditional sense that people understand it, right?
Correct. So this will cut across, because you might have a good fertilizer package or a good fertilizer program, but the variety that you're growing, or even the crop that you're growing, is not suitable for that region. So again, you say that will not give you the optimal returns if you're looking at a profitable enterprise.
Yes.
So it encompasses all inputs, starting from fertilizers to the seeds and the varieties, and to the crop protection product that you'll be using. Yeah.
So you said step 1 was the testing, step 2 is the inputs. What is step 3?
So step 3 is the management practices involved throughout the entire process. Again, it has to be the whole totality package. If you do one right and skip all the others, you're already doomed for failure. Now, what we have noted over the years that we've been here, actually we are on our 30th year anniversary this year here in Kenya. What we have noticed is that just giving the farmer the right product does not necessarily equate to a profitable translation when it comes to their production. How to use that product is also very, very key. You see, there's something in crop nutrition we call the 4 R's, basically 4 right things to do.
Yes.
It starts off with the right product, then goes to the right quantity, then goes to the right timing, and finally the right placement. So if you combine all these factors together, you are essentially giving your crop the best of a chance when it comes to accessing the nutrients that you supply. Yeah.
So for a person who's out there right now and they've been listening and they're not sure what to do next, how important is it to get the guidance of a professional who can then walk with this journey, with you on this journey, especially knowing that for a lot of farmers, the biggest challenge for them is that they mostly will try to do this through their own experience and knowledge.
It is paramount that you actually get the right help. Let me give you my own example.
Yes.
Every now and then I'll try to do a little bit of farming based on the time I have.
Yes.
And with all the years I have been in the industry, I still seek expert opinion because there's somebody out there who's more knowledgeable on a particular crop or a particular program more than I am. I do not consider myself to know everything, so I'll always get professional help. For farmers, it's important because there's so many things that are emerging and changing all the time.
Yes.
For example, you might have a product that you're using last year, but then this year there is a new product that has come in, has been formulated and has been built upon the failures or the successes of the past or history. So keeping up with this trend, talking to professionals, working with them hand in hand also gives you that advantage and opportunity to get the best out of your enterprise.
So when we started out, we started talking about the major macronutrients. A lot of people are used to the NPK aspects. Before we go to a break, can we talk about the other things that your soil might be lacking, that your crops might need, that then bring about the need for fertilization?
Okay. So the biggest ones are what we call the primary nutrients. Those would be the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Commonly known as NPK together. Those, in most cases, farmers will at some point in their fertilizer program include that. Now we go into the secondary category, aptly named secondary, and you have three elements there. You have your calcium, your magnesium, and your sulfur. They are also required in very large quantities. In fact, sometimes for an element like calcium, for example, if you do a plant analysis, it will most likely be the second or the third in terms of total quantities in a plant. But most often it's very ignored. So you can imagine an element that is required in that high volumes and is not missing in the plant, already the plant is not optimal. Then you go to the micronutrients. These are nutrients that will be technically or most of the time be required in grams per acre rather than kilograms per acre. For the kilograms per acre, you have the NPKs and your secondary. Those one in kilograms per acre. The micronutrients required in very, very small quantities, but their impact is usually very, very huge. So this is where you have the likes of zinc that you already mentioned. You have some boron in there. You have others called manganese, molybdenum, iron, and in some cases chlorine. So these are the different categories of nutrients that a crop will require from beginning all the way to harvest.
So if you think about the fact that this planting season, a lot of people are looking at what we term the staples of our country. So some people have planted maize, some people have planted beans, others are going for potatoes, others, so depending on the different areas. How then do farmers know whether they're doing the right thing in terms of, so I've already started planting, I got the subsidy because I got the text and went and collected and I've put it in the ground. So how do I salvage the situation from there to know that maybe my crop is doing well or there are no deficiencies or that I might need to input something?
So different crops will have different requirements. They will all require the same list of nutrients that you have already mentioned, but in terms of proportion and quantity to each other, they are very, very different. So for example, maize will still require all the 13 or 12 that we talked about, but the proportions will be very different from a potato crop, for example. So what we have done is, because this now falls into the realm of a very technical information. So what we do is curate a program for the farmer based on the crop that they are growing. And then try to match that with the typical soil analysis that we have for our region. So a good example is maize. We look at maize, what does maize require in terms of these nutrients, the quantities that the maize will require, and then look at our soils. We have a huge database of soil data within Yara, for example. So we go look at that, analyze that and see the bigger picture. In our maize growing areas, which nutrients are limiting, which ones will be problematic to the farmer. And then now we formulate a product that will specifically address those deficiencies, focusing on the requirement of maize. So what the farmer is getting is a product that will feed the maize crop, but also address the deficiencies in the soil. So therefore you find that the farmer is getting the benefit of both. One, improved productivity, and two, reduced depletion of nutrients in the soil. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. We need to go to a short commercial break, but on the other side of that, I think we can then start to have a discussion on the management aspects of that and how to ensure that you're doing the right thing so that once you have started the growth, you've done the application, how do you manage it to ensure that you have good results? But that, of course, in a couple of minutes. We go on a short commercial break. We'll see you in just 2 or 3 minutes.
Akishiba, utashiba. Fugo layer feed, Fugo Kienyeji feed, and broiler 2-stage and 3-stage diet. Products of Unga Farm Care.
Well, thank you for staying with us here on the Farm Kenya show. On this second part of the show, we want to talk more about management and ensuring that your productivity hits the levels that you want, courtesy of you doing the right thing and taking the best advice. And we want to start you off with the things that you need to know about fertilizer and the things that you need to keep in mind to ensure that you're ticking the right boxes. And to start us out, a shocking statistic, only 3 out of 10 farmers in Kenya use the right amount of fertilizer. That's less than 30%. This, of course, is a testimony to the issues about productivity that we're talking about now. Second, not all soils are the same, and indeed not all fertilizers are the same, and not all of them will work everywhere. That's second. Now, third, crop-specific fertilizers can increase yields by up to 30%. And fourth, one soil test can save you thousands in terms of input costs. Now, this, of course, is key to getting the data that we've been talking about in the first part. And this, of course, gives you the right information to make the decisions that you need in terms of what fertilizer application and management you will need. And then maize yields in Kenya dropped by 18% between 1992 and 2013. That's an interesting statistic. And of course, many factors there to blame, but also, of course, to remember that productivity, of course, is determined a lot by the quality of the planting, quality of management, and quality of inputs. Now, fertilizer blends aren't just about maize. Everything else, including horticulture and other crops, will need them as well. And then cheap fertilizer isn't always smart fertilizer. So sometimes thinking about costs as the main driver might not be the correct way to go. And lastly, modern fertilizers contain more than just nitrogen and phosphorus. We talked about macronutrients, micronutrients, and many other things. Well, good points to get us back to our guest. You've had for yourself when we've talked about the things that have driven productivity for farmers. Why is management such a big challenge? How come people will sometimes have the knowledge, but they will not want to use it? Is it an issue of cost? Is it people just ignorant, or they simply want to do what they do? What has been your experience?
I think it's a combination of many factors. Key is, as human beings, we are very comfortable with the systems or the ways of doing things that we are used to.
Yes.
Changing from one practice to the next is not always easy, and this applies to farming as well. Good example, going back to what you've just mentioned, starting off in the 90s.
Yes.
We did get a recommendation program for fertilizer from Kari back then,
yes,
present-day Calro, in the 1985, around there. So what this report had is, one, it tried to understand soil fertility for the first time on scale. And then it came up with crop and region-specific recommendation. And then right at about that time, there was a bit of a liberalization in the market.
Yes.
And this saw entrance of private sector, now the fertilizer sector. So now what you have in the early 90s is a combination of recommendations based on data that Carol had developed at that time, and then entry into the market by private players. So now you're getting more fertilizers into the market, higher quality fertilizers in the market, and we had that higher productivity in the early 90s. Now remember, this was based on the data that was available back then.
That time, yes.
And the focus was majorly on the NPKs that we have mentioned. The technology, of course, that we had at that time in terms of how you can measure nutrients was also limited. So things like micronutrients really were not a key focus.
Yes.
One, the technology was not there, and they were not seen as the major determinants. So that report heavily had a lot of what the farmers became used to, the DAP and CAN, or DAP and urea. There was also the 23-23 in that report. And that became the cornerstone for an extended period of time. Now, for the viewers, we've already mentioned that the crop will require a wide range of nutrients.
Yes.
So now what happened is that the soils back then, because now we were also coming into a system, a more commercial system, moving away from subsistence. Remember the subsistence kind of that we grew up with our grandmothers, just a small portion of land for your own consumption. If you get a little bit of more bags, you can sell. Now we are shifting from that to a more commercially focused system. And that requires now optimization of everything from land, from inputs and everything. So we are moving now into a more commercially focused production system that has quite a huge output. It requires a lot of nutrient removal. So we are maintaining DAPCN, which will give you like 2 nutrients out of the 13.
Yes.
The soil keeps providing the other 11. But the soil can only do that up to a certain point.
Yes.
Where this nutrient now become depleted to a point that the soil is not able to provide
the soil
it anymore.
becomes exhausted.
And then now you start to see that dip in productivity as you've just read. Now that is one on input. On the other hand, we adopted a system of turning the soil. Every season we want to turn the soil.
So
and
the plowing.
Exactly, plowing. The deep disc plow that you turn your soil.
You throw in a tractor and you see these huge mounds which are then hit with the harrow.
Exactly. So now we are beating our soils into very, very fine tilt. And that was okay because that was the information that was out there. You need to prepare your land early and prepare it to a fine tilt.
Yes.
Now what this does is that it disrupts the physical and biological and to some extent the chemical aspects of that soil.
The soil structure.
And it means now it keeps now degrading even faster. So now when you combine these two factors, it becomes a very unsustainable manner. And that is why now the focus has changed.
It's interesting that you say that because when I go home and I see the fine till that you're saying, so they bring in the tractor, the plow really deep, almost 1.5 feet, and turn that over. Then they beat the thing with into really fine stuff, and then the machines will plant. 2-3 months later, people are praying for rain. I go through Timau a lot, and you will rarely see a tractor doing plowing. Sometimes you see the chisel or just the harrow after 3 months of wheat or whatever crop, and then they plant in the midst of that chaos.
Correct.
And then the things germinate. And you're wondering, this place hasn't been tilled, but the things... So what does this sort of more modern management mean, and what does it take?
So the idea is to not disturb your soil if you don't have to. You see, if you leave the soil with living roots and living plants growing on, it comes to an equilibrium where it even extends the depth. It creates pathways for air and water, and this is very vital because now even microorganisms are able to survive there.
Yes.
Because you're not turning and exposing the material that was in there, the living organisms have more material to eat. Because you're not beating it to a fine tilt, you're not clogging or blocking the top surface, and you have air and water percolating down. So that way you come up where the soil sort of gets an equilibrium, stabilizes itself, it's able to build what we call organic matter down the profile, the water channels are created, and these also support now, help to support the crop as it grows.
What will it take for that mindset change? Because majority of the farmers that I know today, of the old variety, who want to beat the soil to death, and then who measure their farming prowess in the depth and the fineness of the soil that they start with during planting. What does it take?
It takes a lot of sensitization and demonstration. So a good example is what we've been trying to do. In Yara, we have hubs called Yara Knowledge Centers.
Yes.
So in one of these, what we are trying to demonstrate is the long-term effect of the minimal soil disturbance. So we have them side by side. plow the normal and harrow and do all that, and then this other side, no soil disturbance. Just come and do your chisel and plow. So eventually, over time, we can be able to demonstrate not only the productivity, but we can also start showing the profitability is increasing and that your soil health indicators are actually improving over time. So that is one of the things that we are really trying to do and showcase, because to a farmer, if they can see it, they can believe it and they can relate to it more than if you are trying to talk to them about it, because conceptualization again is not that difficult. Easy. Yes.
Now there is this other lot, the ones who will swear by organic fertilizer, and they will say mimi niliwachana na chemicals. Hiyo maneno ya kutoka kwa duka, that they will only do what they either something from manure or composting or one of those things. They are not going for organic or as they say per se. But for them, they believe that through their own that exercise of creating their own organic fertilizer, they will be able to achieve the same results at scale. Is this actually sustainable?
So what we have is something called integrated soil fertility management programs. This sort of combines all the sources of nutrients or fertilizers that you have, because each one of them will have their own advantages over the other. The advantage of organic fertilizer is that it will provide you with nutrients across the range that we've talked about. It will be very, very good at improving your soil structure, your water holding capacity. It will promote biological activity. On the other hand, the mineral fertilizers, they come in very high concentration. Lower range of nutrients, but very, very high concentration. So if you look at 1 ton of manure, for example, it might give you maybe 3 kilos of nitrogen in total. That is way less than 1 bag of a planting fertilizer will give you. So those are the difference. But it will be very, very good at building your soil structural and soil biological activity. So now what we are advocating for, to be able to meet the plant demand, because in some cases, actually in most cases when the crop is growing, the nutrient demand may outpace the rate at which an organic fertilizer will release the nutrients. Because organic fertilizer will not necessarily come with a ready to uptake nutrient form. It will need a lot of time and conversion for the plant to be able to take. Now in those instances, when the crop needs the nutrient very quickly, very fast in a high quantity, that may not be able to sustain that. But if we combine these two, we are actually getting the best of both worlds, both taking care of the soil and meeting the crop demand.
When you look at the productivity in Kenya for farmers especially, one of the major challenges has been land sizes. And then the fact that over that time, because it's generational land, that sort of thing, it, as we talked about, it gets depleted. For that kind of person, we know that correct application of fertilizer and proper management of their soil will play a good part in maintaining productivity. Now, as we start to get these people to walk journeys where we might talk about larger land sizes, higher productivity, maybe even land consolidation and that sort of thing, what role can correct fertilizer application play in driving productivity and enhancing their output?
Actually, one of the advantages that a small farmer will have is that he might actually be able to get the amount of organic manure, fertilizer, organic manure that would be required. Unlike a person who's doing 1,000 acres trying to apply two tons per acre of 1,000, that becomes a challenge. But a farmer with an acre, then that starts to become actually possible. So it is possible. Scale is not really important. It's what you are doing within that scale, because you can have a small piece of land, but the productivity is higher than somebody who has a large, or what you call the large scale production. The practices that you need to put in there, they have to be right. Remember, the primary objective of a farmer is to be the caretaker of his soil. That is the primary responsibility. And that means you need to not only be fully focused on the crop, you need to be cognizant of what you're doing to the soil as well.
Let's think about then from a national perspective, the fact that the country aspires to higher productivity, it aspires to make its farmers more productive. Is there an ideal amount of application per farmer, per acreage, or per planting season and that sort of thing, what are the general markers that people should be thinking about so that you're either within a national average or surpassing that to drive productivity?
We are very actually lucky to have a very strong and vibrant private sector to complement what the government is trying to do. Extension is a very, very expensive endeavor. And where the government is not able to do, the public now, with such a vibrant sector growing, is able to partially cover that, not everything. That cuts across inputs.
Yes.
A good example is during the early 2000, we had an increase in soil testing services, for example, from private players.
Yes.
Now, what this brought about is new technologies that were emerging at the time. And one of the consequences of that is that we now had the technology to identify other nutrients that we were not previously able. A good example is what was done in 1985. I mentioned micronutrients were not focused. That was partially due to the technology available at the time. Early 2000 comes in the private sector for the labs. And they have this technology now to start detecting further. The nutrients, the micronutrients that now have become the biggest problem. It's not even the macros that are the problem. What that saw now is again a shift to the type of fertilizer from the private sector, now focusing on compound fertilizers that had an extended range of nutrients. So from 2 to 3 nutrients per season, extending that to 8, just from that data alone. Because now we understand that this has become a problem. If we put that in, that becomes a value addition into that product, and the farmer can actually gain something from that. To go back to something that you had mentioned earlier, soil testing will save you thousands because it means now you're getting the right product. On the flip side is that your productivity goes up. Now you're getting double benefit. You're saving money on the wrong inputs, and you're getting a boost in productivity. What we have seen is a case of maize, for example, is a shift from within the range of 15 to 18 bags. And these were typically considered the good farmers. You know, the kind of farmers somebody would want to emulate in the village. Now, when we shifted using data-driven fertilizer product, we saw a jump from 20 to 27 to 33. That is simply by using data to give them a more customized product that is suitable for their crop. And you can see we're already 50% over what he was doing. It's actually double now. It's not even 50, it's a double of what they were currently doing.
So if then you are to think about, if you put yourself in the shoes of many of the farmers out there, would you then say that information is the biggest challenge that they have? Is it lack of proper data, or is it lack of knowledge? What do you think the biggest challenge is, and how do we cure it?
It's the knowledge gap. We do have the knowledge. For example, Yara has a wide database of knowledge, both from soil to crops to climate-related issues. Now, how this knowledge gets to the farmer, that has always been the challenge. One, because it's expensive to disseminate that information, and then packaging it in a way that a farmer would be able to utilize it is also another challenge. One of the easiest ways to disseminate information faster is leveraging on technology. So what we have done is we developed an application called Yara Farm Care. So now Yara Farm Care combines all these bits and bobs of information into one single platform. So you can get your fertilizer calculator in there. Like a farmer, you want to start farming maize and you don't know what to use. Do you know how much bags you want to harvest? Input those numbers there. Put your acreages and then just hit calculate, and it will give you amount of fertilizer that you need to apply at what the type of fertilizer, the quantity, and when to apply. If you want to use weather data to plan your activity, it has a weather app inside there. Now recently we've actually introduced a new feature within the app where the farmer can, if you suspect you have issues, nutrition issues on your farm, because not every farmer will be able to take plant tissue and take to the lab, get assessment, and be told what's the problem.
Take a picture.
You don't even take a picture. Go to the app, open it, scroll to the crop that you have, and look at the picture that comes close to what you're seeing in the field. And then it will explain what it is, what is causing it, what will make it worse, and best of all, give you a solution on how to solve it. So having this in one package allows us to reach thousands and hundreds of thousands of farmers in real time. Because what they also get is real-time advisory during the season.
Yes.
Once you plant and you put in the data there, it will keep telling you, you're in week 3, this is what you need to look out for. You're in week 4, this is what you need to look out for. And that way you are able to take farmers throughout the journey and reach many farmers without necessarily the cost that will be involved on the actual field visits. Yeah.
For me, one of the challenges I believe government created when it rolled out the fertilizer subsidy program was that the touch point for many farmers used to be purchase of input. So that these people, when they are buying the seed, they will go to the agrovet and speak to that person and be told, you're buying this number of maize, they have varieties. And then they'll talk about fertilizer. But now that has been taken away from them because you get your text, you go collect, then you go and apply. So quite a large gap. Maybe it will be filled in by that technology. As we start to finalize, for many people, the challenge, of course, is also capital. So they're thinking about costs. How do you balance the correct application, the right amount of fertilizer, and the cost? Are there corners that you can cut? Are there shortcuts? Are there ways to optimize your fertilizer application, make your shilling go further?
Yeah, so that is very, very true. And farmers are not the same in terms of their ability, financial ability or investment ability. And we are aware of that.
Yes.
So what we did was to come up with something we call our steps of differentiation. I'm a farmer, you're a farmer, we are both maize farmers, but I am only able to invest this much. You are a big farmer, you are able to go over and beyond. You will go all out, you will go for precision application and everything. So what we did with these steps of differentiation is segment the different levels of the farmers based on their capability. And then we curated a program based on that. So we do have, for example, if you come to Yara, a maize program designated for somebody who's trying to move from subsistence just to start wakuanzishia. And that, what that does is try to have the highest return on investment, because this farmer does not have a lot of money to invest. So for every shilling that he invests, he needs to get a lot more at low scale. Beyond that, we go to the next farmer. They have been doing farming, they have been using fertilizers, but that regime has not been giving them the best returns. What can we do to offer that as a solution at that level to improve their productivity and return on investment? Then when we go to the extreme end where we have the big commercial guys.
Precision farming.
Now we go precision farming, we go beyond nutrition. Now we are going through things like biostimulants, and these are like insurance against consequences of climate change. They can be able to afford that, and this also gives them a return at that level. So just having that steps of differentiation ensures that we are able to cater for all the farmers that we have.
Okay, indeed. Thank you very much, Godfrey, for your time. Unfortunately, we are at the end of our conversation. The 1 hour does really rush when you're having fun.
Exactly.
It has been an interesting conversation, and of course something for everybody at the different levels of productivity and different levels of input. And for many people thinking through just what they have to do to get the maximum yield out of this planting season by correct application, correct management, and of course correct husbandry as per our discussion. Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you so much.
Well, unfortunately, that's why we bring it to a close for this conversation here today. Of course, we'll be here tomorrow for yet another edition on Farm Kenya, but for now, it is Kwaheri ya Konana up next to the news in Swahili. My name is Peter Wakaba. It has been a blast. Enjoy the rest of your viewing.
Unalima ardhi, mlango wa kulima, kuwa mshindi, kuwa na uhakika sasa, kulea mustakabali wa baadaye. Tufanye kazi pamoja na tukue pamoja, kuimarisha Kenya ni jukumu la Farm Kenya.
Farm Kenya, brought to you by Fugo.